You consider to be the worst investment you've ever made?
The worst investment I ever made? How long do you have? Well, I've made some very bad ones, but that doesn't really bother me. It may bother the shareholders, but that's another question. You're going to make mistakes in life. I mean, there's no question about it. You don't want to make them on the big decisions, who you marry and some things like that. So there's no way I'm going to make a lot of business and investment decisions without making some mistakes. I may try to minimize them. I don't dwell on them at all. I don't look back. The biggest mistakes are the ones that actually don't show up. They're the mistakes of omission rather than commission. We've never lost that much money on any one investment. But it's the things that I knew enough to do that I didn't do. I love it when the things we buy go down. Stocks are down today, and I'm buying more of something I was buying yesterday. I'm buying it cheaper. Now, when you go to the grocery store and you buy something cheaper than you bought it the day before, you think that's terrific. But people with their stocks, they think that the stock knows more than they do. When the stock goes down, they say the stock is telling them something, And what's telling me is I can get more for my money. But they take it as kind of a referendum on themselves, and it's me versus the stock. If it ever gets back to what I paid, I'm going to sell it. The stock doesn't care what you paid. The stock doesn't even care that you own it. You are nothing to the stock. That stock is everything to you. And you remember you paid $10.13. Therefore, the stock should get to $10.13 before you sell it. But there is nothing about the price action of the stock that tells you whether you should keep owning it. What tells you whether you should keep owning it is what you expect the company to do in the future versus the price at which it's selling now, compared to the other opportunities of businesses that you think you know equally well, and make that same comparison. And that's all there is to owning stocks.
Buy on borrowed money. You should pay off all credit card debt before you buy, because any securities, because you're paying 18% on credit card debt and you're not going to make more than 18% a year in the market. Then, if you want to pick stocks, stick with the things that you understand and look at them as businesses. If you just feel you want to own a part of American business over a period of time, you just put a little money in every month for the next 30 years into some sort of a group of stocks, maybe an index fund.
Any pieces of advice you would give to people who are looking to succeed in business?
Well, by far the best investment you can make is in yourself. I mean, for example, communication skills. I tell the students that come, they're going to graduate schools and business, and they're learning all these complicated formulas and all that. If they just learn to communicate better, both in writing and in person, they increase their value at least. Somebody like LeBron, and we've talked about it, but I think...
You and LeBron have talked about it?
Occasionally. I think actually if through the rest of his career and beyond in terms of earning power then, just making monthly investments in a low-cost index fund makes a lot of sense. I think that somebody in his position ought to have a significant cash reserve and whatever makes them comfortable. And then beyond that, owning a piece of America, a diversified piece, bought over time, held for 30 or 40 years, it's bound to do well. And the income will go up over the years, and there's really nothing to worry about. So it's the same advice I give 99% of people.
Buy an index fund.
And doing it over time, and starting early, starting young in life. And nobody's ever followed that and gotten other than a decent result. Nobody.
Live by this phrase, every second counts.
100%.
So now we're going to make every second count together with these questions. Best way to become a millionaire?
Well, the best way to do it is to be born into a family where you're going to choose the right womb.
Best way to be a self-made millionaire?
Figure out what your strengths are and then pick the right people, and don't be afraid of making mistakes.
What was your first job?
It was selling Coke door to door, I believe.
How old were you when you first started selling Coca-Cola?
Either 6 or 7.
How many Coca-Colas do you drink a day?
Well, now I only drink about 2. When I was in fighting trim, which was for a lot of years, about 5.
5.
And I'm talking 12 ounces servings.
Favorite dessert?
Oh, I would say I like root beer floats, but I like chocolate sundaes.
True, you had a car with the license plate Thrifty on the back.
That is true.
And are you thrifty?
I'm cheap,
Yeah.
but I try to. I like to think of it as thrifty.
You are worth $150 billion.
Depends on the day, yeah.
Is it true that you still live in the same house you bought in 1958 for $31,000?
$31,500.
$31,500.
Yeah.
Favorite book?
Well, the book that did the most for me was reading The Intelligent Investor. in 1949.
What are you streaming or watching?
Football mostly.
Nothing as good as Breaking Bad?
Breaking Bad was the best.
I know you loved it. What's the best investment someone can make?
Well, you invest in yourself. Can't take away what's up here. One little suggestion for you. Pick out the person in the class that you admire the most, and then write down why you admire them. Put down a list of qualities. You're not to name yourself in this, incidentally. And then put down the one that, frankly, you could stand the least in the whole group, and put down the qualities that turn you off in that person. Then look at that list, and you won't find it's a bunch of things like throwing a football 70 yards or anything of the sort. The qualities of the first one that you admire are qualities that you, with a little practice, can make your own, and which, if practiced, will become habit forming. The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. I mean, my age, I can't change any of my habits. I mean, I'm stuck. But at your age, you will have the habits 20 years from now that you decide to put into practice today. So I just suggest that you look at the habits you admire in others, or the behavior you admire in others, and make those your own habits, and you look at what you really find somewhat reprehensible in others, and just decide, those are things you're not going to do. Ben Franklin did that a few hundred years ago, and it still works today.
What advice you give to somebody who's a young investor who would like to emulate you, what you would recommend that they do to kind of build something close to what you've done?
I think you should look for the job that you would want to hold if you didn't need a job. I mean, you're probably only going to live once. You don't want to go sleepwalking through life, and you really, whether you make X or 120% of X, it really isn't remotely as important as to whether, in most cases, you marry the right person and you also find something that you would do if you didn't need the money. And I've had that job for 50 or more years, and I was lucky in that I sort of found early on what turned me on that way. But don't settle for something if you can possibly. Don't worry about making the most money this week or next month. I mean, when I offered to work for Ben Graham, I said I'll work for nothing, and I meant it. Just the idea of being turned on. So look for the job that turns you on. Find a passion. The best thing you can do is to be exceptionally good at something. If you're the best doctor in town, if you're the best lawyer in town, if you're the best whatever it may be, whatever abilities you have can't be taken away from you. They can't actually be inflated away from you. People in this room owned all of the farmland in the United States, and you offered me a 1% interest in it, $25 billion. I'll write you a check this afternoon. $25 billion, now I own 1% of the farmland. If you tell me you own 1% of the apartment houses in the United States, another $25 billion or something, I'll write you a check. Now, if you told me you owned all of the Bitcoin in the world and you offered it to me for $25, I wouldn't take it, because what would I do with it? I have to sell it back to you one way or another. I mean, it isn't going to do anything. The apartments are going to produce rental and farms are going to produce food. And if I've got all the Bitcoin, I'm back where whatever his name was, who may or may not have existed, was 15 years ago. If I've got it all, people will say, why should I buy some Bitcoin from you? I mean, why don't you call it Buffett coin? Make your own or something. Do something, but I'm not going to give you anything for it. That explains the difference between productive assets and something that depends on the next guy paying you more than the last guy got. Say you'd taken that $10,000 and you'd listen to the prophets of doom and gloom around you, and instead you'd use the $10,000 to buy gold. Look in your safe deposit box, and you'd have your 100 ounces of gold, and you could look at it, and you could fondle it, and you could, whatever you wanted to do with it. But it didn't produce anything. It was never going to produce anything. And what would you have today? You would have 300 ounces of gold, just like you had in March of 1942, and it would be worth approximately $400,000. So if you decided to go with a non-productive asset, gold, instead of a productive asset, which actually was earning more money and reinvesting and paying dividends and maybe purchasing stock, whatever it might be, you would now have over 100 times the value of what you would have had with a non-productive asset. In other words, for every dollar you have made in American business, you'd have less than a penny of gain by buying in this store of value, which people tell you to run to every time you get scared by the headlines or something of the sort. And read. I probably read 5 to 6 hours a day. I don't read as fast now as when I was younger, but I read 5 daily newspapers. I read a fair number of of magazines. I read 10Ks, I read annual reports, and I read a lot of other things too. So I've always enjoyed reading. I love reading biographies, for example.
And you process information very quickly.
Well, I have some filters in my mind. So if somebody calls me about an investment in a business or an investment in securities, I usually know in 2 or 3 minutes whether I have an interest, and I don't waste any time with the ones in which I don't have an interest. I always worry a little bit about even appearing rude, because I can tell very, very, very quickly whether it's going to be something that's will lead to something, or whether it's just a half an hour, an hour, or 2 hours of chatter. I told students, if when they got out of school, they got a punch card with 20 punches on it, and that's all the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich, because they would think very hard about each one. And you don't need 20 right decisions to get very rich. 4 or 5 will probably do it.